If you've seen any of my videos, you may have wondered what is this contraption behind me. That's my homemade bookshelf. I record my videos in my junk room. It's sort of a junk room slash study. It's not for show, it's utilitarian. I have a microwave, a toaster, coffee maker, a sink, books, and tools and knickknacks and stuff. It's a little hideout. Um, it's heated only with a small heater at my feet, and on a cold morning, I'll often be wearing a jacket or a sweater. This bookshelf behind me contains books that I have picked up from libraries who were discarding books and selling them for 10 cents, 25 cents. And I have frequented bookstores, one of them called the Ridiculous Bookstore, where you can buy books really cheap, read them, and then bring them back and trade them in for other books really cheap. This behavior, I admit, is very odd, very strange. And I have never asked myself why I do this. But I'm telling you that this is my MO, which I admit is bizarre. But I have in my collection and have read, for example, the autobiography of Armand Hammer, mentioned in Diana West's book, who worked with Harry Hopkins and Harry Dexter White on the Lend-Lease program, which, according to Diana West, not only provided Soviet Russia in the 1940s, with jet fuel and trucks and winter boots for Stalin's soldiers, jet fuel. But according to Diana West, uranium and uranium technology used in the making of an atomic bomb. West's book is sourced with footnotes, endnotes. When she mentions something, she shows you where to find the source, the exact sentence from the exact document, and the location of this document, or this book, or this report. I also have 3 or 4 books by Winston Churchill. One of them, I believe, is a condensation of 3 of the books, detailing Winston Churchill's experience during the 40s, the early 40s, the late 30s. Churchill doesn't mention Kim Philby, but I have read other books about real, authentic spies. Now, I have not read, for example, and I know nothing at this point about a man named George Racy Jordan. And until I study that, I'm willing to assume that it's possible that this is a disinformation book written by the KGB. Until I assure myself that it is authentic, I will have no confidence in what he says. But it is somewhat corroborated by these other sources. Perhaps Racy Jordan is not authentic. Suppose it's bogus. You have to read Diana's book, with the understanding that she could easily have gotten some small point wrong. So take the book as a whole, knowing that there could be some boo-boos inside, little boo-boos, which should not cause you to dismiss the overall thesis of her book, which is that the Soviets had a considerable influence operation going in the White House. And in my opinion, this influence operation has continued and grown and is now overwhelming. And that explains why an obscure nobody with no background, no credentials, except those that were hastily manufactured, an obscure nobody was propelled into the White House and then reelected. It's a tremendous influence operation. So tremendous, so overwhelming, so powerful that not only can Diane West be attacked nationwide in the press, but if someone like me pops up making similar claims, I will be knocked down in the same way that Sarah Palin was knocked down. Would you believe that when she announced her candidacy for vice president, protesters immediately appeared on the streets carrying signs, vulgar signs, in an organized effort to discredit her? They were attacking her personally without any knowledge of her stance on any issue. A crowd that would make a placard saying Sarah Palin is a cunt is a very rowdy, ignorant crowd of troublemakers. The best they could do to silence Sarah Palin was to say such things as, she says she can see Russia from her porch. Oh, oh. And they say, why, she was interviewed by Charlie Gibson and she didn't even know what the Bush Doctrine was. Ah, ah. And there's an army of commenters and propaganda spreaders on YouTube, or was at the time, so that whenever this interview by Charlie Gibson was aired, the day after and the several days after, thousands of commenters were all over YouTube. Oh, Sarah Palin doesn't know what the Bush Doctrine is. So somebody like me would respond to these commenters to see exactly what they knew about the Bush Doctrine, which doesn't exist. There is no such thing. That's why Sarah Palin didn't know about it. It existed only in the minds of a few left-leaning journalists. It was their way of describing whatever, in a general term, whatever Bush was trying to accomplish, and it had morphed repeatedly over the years to come to mean at that moment Bush's policy of preemption, in a meaning that if you think there's somebody, a dangerous country, for example, preemption is the policy of attack them before they can attack us. That was their definition at that moment of the Bush Doctrine. Charlie Gibson asked Sarah Palin, what is your opinion of the Bush Doctrine? And she, of course, responded, what do you mean, Charlie? You mean Bush's worldview? And he looks at her over his bifocals, or those little half glasses. You don't know what the Bush Doctrine is? Well, no, Charlie. What do you mean? What are you referring to? And see, this is all bogus, but they do this with such a massive force, so widespread, so pervasive, that it effectively chokes out the little moles that pop up in the yard, that they're in their lawn, which they own. The leftists own the USA, they own the White House, and when a mole pops up in the yard, pop! They immediately pop it with a baseball bat. and the mole buries itself back down into the ground and disappears, and runs for its life. That is the existing influence operation that began in the time of Roosevelt in the late 30s, or the middle and late 30s, and continues to this day. Here's an example of disinformation. Suppose it began to snow in Texas, and the snow covered the whole state of Texas, and it kept snowing day after day, snowing and snowing. It kept snowing so much that the snow began to build up and get very deep. Now just imagine this. The snow built up and built up, and the snow at the bottom of this big pile of snow began to compress under the weight of all this snow. And even the ground itself began to sink down under the weight of all this snow. And it continued snowing and snowing over the whole state of Texas. It continued snowing. Now, to keep this snow from melting, you're going to have to move this state of Texas up to around the North Pole, up there around Greenland. And that's exactly the way Greenland is. It's a huge area covered by snow that has compressed and even squashed the earth beneath it, creating a basin. And the snow builds up and builds up over centuries, millennia, until the ice, the compressed snow, the ice, is a mile deep, sitting in a basin created by the weight. And of course, that weight pushes the earth in other places and deforms the whole planet. That's a huge weight. Millions of cubic miles of frozen water. Will it melt? Well, I don't think so, because the temperature always stays, winter and summer, the temperature always stays well below the freezing point, at least 20 degrees Celsius below the freezing point. It doesn't melt, it only extrudes where there were rivers, or where you would imagine rivers should be. There is a continuous stream of ice being squashed out, squeezed out, extruded out, like a frozen river of ice, which reaches the ocean, breaks off, and falls into the water. It's been doing this forever, so to speak. A long time. Long before Columbus came to North America, long before the Spanish conquistadors came to Central America, long before Benjamin Franklin, George Washington, this ice has been falling into the ocean, this huge mass of ice. It doesn't remain consistent. It shrinks slightly and grows slightly from time to time. The area up there is sometimes passable by sailing ships and sometimes not. Unless you warm the entire planet considerably, that ice is going to stay there. The disinformation campaign is carried out by placing cameras, time-elapsed cameras, at the exact spots where this ice is breaking off and falling into the ocean. That's misleading. If you backed away from this little picture and looked at the whole area, you'd see, good Lord, that's a lot of ice, and only a small portion is extruding like a river toward the ocean here and there. These are called glaciers. And yes, they retreat and they advance. And sometimes they advance considerably. Sometimes this mass of ice expands with snow because of precipitation. Water vapor sucked out of the Pacific near the equator falls on the poles in the form of snow. And this massive ice throughout geologic time has expanded and covered Canada down into the North American continent, say around Illinois, Ohio, and then retreated, and then later advanced again, and then retreated. None of this has to do with carbon dioxide emitted by humans.